In this episode, Zorthian Ranch, the artist enclave created by the eccentric Armenian refugee Giawar Zorthian.
As you come up the hill from Altadena into the Zorthian Ranch, it's like a different world up here.
Art on display at the Los Angeles International Airport.
I think as people travel from one place to another, there's a change that happens in their lives, and I think that's what happens in this installation.
Nicole Hebron's Gallery Tally project, cataloging gender inequality in art galleries across the world.
The overall statistics are 70% men, so how is that possible that gender isn't playing some part in that? It has to.
Alan Nakagawa's Conical Sound, a sound sculpture borrowing from Gaudi's iconic Sagrada Familia in Barcelona and Watts Towers in Los Angeles.
I have field recordings of various locations. I want to combine them to make a new space.
And graphic artist and music video director David Lewandowski, whose cutting-edge work draws on his passion for arcade games.
Something like going to the store late from eating feels like mental illness when you're creating it, and it really can drive you crazy trying to make something like that.
Next on Artbound.
I am Kathy Hui. I am a TV journalist and a resident of Altadena. Like many people who get the opportunity to visit the Zorthian Ranch, I was completely surprised that there was this art land practically right in my backyard, and I had not known about it. The original owner of the ranch was an Armenian immigrant by the name of Giawar Zorthian. When he drove around the Pasadena area, he would collect discarded items like telephone poles, railroad ties. So essentially anything that he saw that would have ended up in a junkyard, he took them back home to repurpose and make them useful and artistic. The combination of what Giawar did with the Zorthian Ranch space and his big dynamic personality really attracted an eclectic array of people. Andy Warhol, musicians like Bob Dylan, even Nobel Peace Prize physicist Richard Feynman. It was just a big hotspot of creativity and energy.
My father saw every day as something that needed to be lived to the greatest extent possible. And that manifested itself in the art that he created.
At the ranch, there were these wonderful gatherings where artists, filmmakers, musicians, people were given permission because the way he acted, it made people feel like this is a place where I can express sensuality, aesthetics, self-expression.
In a way, it was like an art opening because they would come to see what he'd been working on. Charlie Parker, Buckminster Fuller, Andy Warhol, they would all get into interesting conversations that you just couldn't predict.
He could do anything here at the ranch. Many exciting artworks were made here and all kinds of wonderful people and events. It's a live, moving thing all the time.
I started building on this ranch many years ago. And when I came here in 1946, I decided to do something very exciting with things that were thrown away.
As you come up the hill from Altadena into the Zorthian Ranch, it's like a different world up here. The buildings are all hand-done. My father built most of what was here. He would just build things with rock, telephone poles, whatever existing materials he had, and then create these assemblage walls.
People would bring him things because they say, hey, Zorthian would like this, so they'd bring it up and give it to him. And then he knew demo contractors who, when they knew he liked broken concrete, and they'd bring him that. And he loved the idea of just reusing things. I think he was kind of on the cutting edge of things like that. Seems to me that you didn't see a lot of that back in the late 40s, early 50s, or even the 60s.
I remembered something my father said when we came to this country. What a wonderful, beautiful country. How abundant, how rich, but how much they waste.
My father was the eldest of 3 boys who lived in Turkish Armenia. He had seen some horrible, horrible things, and there was a point where they had to get out.
The Armenian genocide killed 2 million people. He didn't verbalize that too much directly. He didn't talk about the traumatic things he'd seen too much.
They left with very little, and then they migrated to the United States. He actually got into Yale from an athletic scholarship because he was a wrestler. And then he went to Yale School of Fine Arts. He learned all the classics. They had studied architecture and painting and sculpture, and it was the Renaissance training, the way, artists used to have to learn everything.
My father's ability as an artist, his talent as an artist, enabled him to have a tool to work through some of the trauma that he'd experienced. And it, I think, gave his art a certain depth. As for example, when you look at his painting that he did for his thesis at Yale called The Survivors, it's ostensibly a painting about people surviving a shipwreck. But when you look at it in more detail, you can see it's about surviving, just surviving. And his family survived the genocide.
During the war, he did drafting in the Army, and one of his biggest projects was the Phantasmagoria, which was a mural he was asked to do that has many, many panels that were 3 feet high, went all the way around this huge room. And from there, I think that springboarded into the WPA murals that he did for the Work Project Administration. He did 44 of them. Murals all over the United States.
Murals were big in the 30s and maybe the 1940s, but after that they sort of died out. And then he started moving into the more traditional sense of working with galleries and getting his things in museums, and he just wasn't able to adjust to that. He wasn't happy working with the traditional art world. He went his own way, and having this big property offered him that opportunity. He liked the idea of being not just an artist, but also moving into architecture and building with recycled materials. And I think he moved into assemblage art.
My father loved to have people around him. He would do everything he could to gather people. It was very charismatic. There was always food and dancing and music. When he had the parties, it was an opportunity for people to come and see these things that could never be taken to a gallery. People would go in and out of the studio, and then they could wander around the ranch and they could see his walls and his structures.
He loved to bring people together, people who were at the top of their profession, whether it be in business, art, whether it be in science, anyone who was forward-thinking and thought out of the box. My father and Richard Feynman, the well-known physicist, would argue with each other about who appreciated life more. Was it a scientist or an artist? They liked to argue, so I guess that's why they became good friends.
Well, my father was the king of the ranch. He decided to have a great big party that would celebrate his anniversary, spring, and his birthday, which were all sort of in the same time period. I think that it all related to what he used to say, why not? Why not express yourself the way that you really are? Why not be creative and do what your creative work is? It was an expression of his philosophy of life.
My father passed away in 2004. And so that was the end of the line for what he was doing. Then it became time for the rest of us to step up and figure out where to go from there. Today, we have other artists who have studios here. It's just completely something you would never see anywhere else.
They call me Zorthian's disciple. The moment I met Zorthian, within 15 minutes he said, "You missed my party, I need a foreman that's not too creative." And then he found that I could weld, I made drums, and I was already a contractor. I helped him work for 12 and a half years doing construction. At the beginning, I was here to help the man fulfill his vision. I was an assistant, and I was not to be creative. And it allowed me to express myself in my own way, which thrilled the crap out of him. Giving us the scale and the size of the ranch has allowed me to create things like this out of found objects I have found myself. It's heavy gauge steel pipe. There were 70 of them. I took all of them, and I knew what I was going to build. The things that I do in my artwork have always been influenced by the free nature that we have here. There are no restrictions, and things are very organic.
Most artists are closed in a studio, and I was for a very long time. But where I am now is a hay barn, and it was one of Gerard Zorthian's wonders here at the ranch. And it was offered that if I could clean it out, I could also gain the use of it. And it has this open face wall. So even more so than it being a studio, it was a stage. The ranch is an interesting place because it melds art and life together. It has this ruggedness and stables and horses and chickens, but it also melds the practice of creating art, and art out of materials that are often cast-offs. One thing that I love about assemblage art is that it leaves the table wide open for what you can do. The materials change all the time. You are constantly evolving. And it is very, very broad because it's based on what you encounter and the magical reuse of materials like washing machine doors and windows and corrugated metal. And so this kind of place is very nurturing to that work. I feel that assemblage art, artist-made environments, visionary art, the audience and the public becomes a participant. They're not just spectators. The artist projects out, the public responds back. And so you'll have this event unfold in ways that you can't predict.
We're doing a Primavera party, which we haven't done it for 10 years. And it's important to renew this celebration. It brings people into the space and they can see how unique it is and experience it. It brings people together in a creative way and makes them feel a part of it. And that's why we continue to do it.
The ranch is still vital. It's still an ongoing work in progress. The active creativity that takes place between the artists who work here and the public, the thinkers, the artists, the musicians, the art supporters are brought together. They are looking at that legacy and responding to what is happening in a new era.
In the past, it seemed like we attracted nothing but freaks, but the freak vortex that exists today is amazing. The man had a vision. When he passed, there was still 40 years left of work. And I think 10 years later, we still have 40 years worth of work. And we're fulfilling the new vision at the same time.
My name is Shayna Neese Dambrot, and I am an art critic and curator. There's an organization called Los Angeles World Airports. Their sole reason, to exist is to place contemporary rotating exhibitions of art in the public spaces throughout all the terminals of not only LAX, but also several other area airports, Ontario, John Wayne, etc. It really was about an alternative idea about what public art can be and who the public is and what a public space is. You don't necessarily think of an airport terminal or a travel hub concourse as quote-unquote public art space. You think of a bank plaza, a park, where it's outside, for one thing, almost always, and permanent. What makes this model different and interesting is not only the space itself being the airport, but then also that it's conceived to be something that's rotating, that brings in other curators and works directly with artists. You're free to be abstract, you're free to be whimsical, you're free to be interactive, and you're free because it's temporary. So an artist can look at it more like an exhibition in an interesting space and kind of do what they already do. And I love, too, further the idea that you think of the traveling public as the public. Let's say you're coming to Los Angeles. Great, let them fly in to a gallery. Because it's contemporary Los Angeles art, you can actually get a sense of the city you've just arrived in by seeing it.
After 9/11, people's relationships with airports really changed. It's a very stressful environment, and people had to arrive at the airport a lot earlier to allow enough time for security. But once they passed through security, they actually had a lot of time on their hands as they're waiting for their flight. And airport art programs really recognized that was an opportunity to deliver a unique art experience. We try and find those spaces where people might be waiting at a gate or waiting near a security line and really look at how art could transform those areas. Not all the passengers are going to look at the art or may even have an interest in the art. But our philosophy is that, even just having something in the background, something that might catch their eye, whether it's a color or a texture or something with movement, will still add something to the environment. By interacting with some of the artworks, it might help them just to sort of slow down for a minute, just maybe take something in that they hadn't thought about, and it kind of enhances the overall experience at the airport. I think LAX has always had sort of an interesting design aesthetic to it, actually. You have the theme building. It's a very iconic piece of architecture right in the middle of the airport. And then we have the pylons that are welcoming passengers and visitors. As well as some of the historic mosaic murals you'll find in the tunnels. And I think our program is continuing that design aesthetic through the curation of our art exhibitions, from photography to painting to video art to installations to sculpture and even dance. One of the artworks we get a lot of feedback from passengers is Joyce DeLaw's Elevate in Terminal 3, featuring these origami paper airplanes that's been imprinted with the words of the Geneva Conventions as well as the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. And I think the principles that are listed in those documents are really important to keep in mind, especially in an airport such as LAX. Hashtag LAX Poppies is located in our meet and greet area of Terminal 1, right next to baggage claim. So people are sitting there waiting for their friends and family to arrive, and the artwork that's on display there is playing off the idea of presenting a bouquet of flowers to a loved one upon their arrival. So we have these giant portraits of poppies. And the title is an invitation to basically take a photo of themselves in front of the paintings and upload it with the hashtag. And so there's this other virtual exhibition taking place online as well. At LAX, we have a unique opportunity. We have over 50 million passengers on an annual basis, and we have 8 different terminals to show a wide variety of artworks. And I think it's very reflective of the creative community here in Los Angeles.
As a curator, I've worked in galleries, museums, but when I submit a proposal to do an installation at LAX, it's a very different space to handle in so many different ways. So it's very challenging, but also really exciting.
When we were shown Terminal 3, it was this gargantuan white box. We were a little overwhelmed. One wall is 210 feet long. We had a time frame of 3 to 4 days for installation. So we had to develop a piece that could go up in that amount of time.
We wanted to create some moments of intimacy, and also playfulness. So we wanted to add color. We wanted to not make the space feel so large. And so one of the first decisions that we made was how to deal with the long wall. And painting a giant black shape was a great platform to start with, because then we could build off of that.
We're really excited about this particular installation because it's the first time Margaret and Jameson, a husband and wife, they're both artists, but they'd actually never exhibited their work together. But we could see how it could be a really sort of intriguing show, and we could see where their artwork would have a dialogue if it was placed in the same space. So it'll be really interesting to watch this one unfold over the next week.
They're the kind of artists who can handle this kind of a challenge, because I think not everybody can. It's about enhancing the environment, but in a way that works with it, so it takes into consideration the way the airport itself was built.
Traveler is not here to see the work. That's not their impetus for being here. They're here as travelers. We tried to create more of an environmental installation. It allows the viewer to experience it through their periphery or at a glance, something that you experience as you walk through.
I've been working with cut metal for the past couple years. The gates that I've been working with are ones that are found in my neighborhood in Highland Park. So I've been photographing the gates that I see every day, and they're pretty common throughout Southern California. And I'm going to play with the architecture of the space. So we're going to cut out areas where there are doorways into offices, and there's a defibrillator that we're going to cut the metal around.
Margaret's pieces take something that we think of generally as a barrier. It's a gate, is a separation between two spaces, and she transforms it into these really wonderfully flowing, billowy environments and gives it a completely different meaning.
A boundary is really an illusion, and you can pass through. And so we're literally taking it and twisting it and turning it. I think as people travel from one place to another, there's a change that happens in their lives, and I think that that's what happens in this installation. The space our work's installed in is a passageway, so as you're walking through it from one end to the other, it's like a beginning and an end.
Weatherbox is an attempt at taking kind of a section out of the sunset, where the land meets the sun. And we just take that little rectangle out and bring it to you. And it's a mashup of mine and Margaret's work. So doing a big public art piece at LAX is an opportunity to be seen by more people than we would ever have an opportunity to be seen by. It is exposure to the nth degree. If this work were at any museum or art gallery, the amount of exposure is a fraction of what it gets here. And there are very few venues where you get the opportunity to make a 210-foot long piece.
One of the hallmarks of the Los Angeles art community is that it really welcomes experimentation. And I think our exhibition sites are almost like little laboratories. I think that we find artists who are excited to step outside of the gallery and push those boundaries and really see the space through different eyes, through a different viewpoint.
I'm sort of enamored with LAX itself. It's one place in the urban sprawl of Los Angeles that we all end up in at some point, and there's this love-hate relationship that we have with it. You know, it can be a pain to deal with, and there's constant construction. And so I think about it in terms of what that means emotionally to people. It is a point of both departure and arrival. So it could be a happy moment at LAX, it could be a sad moment of saying goodbye to somebody. And all those things inform how I talk to the artists about it, and ultimately how we end up collaborating.
The art world, especially in the gallery world, can seem very insular and elitist. which alienates a lot of people from going into the galleries. The galleries are free. Art is for the people. It is not in a vacuum. And bringing it out into a public venue like LAX is a testament to that.
When I'm walking through the terminals and I see somebody who might be in a big rush but suddenly stop for a minute and look at an artwork, then I'm just reminded what we're trying to do. And then I know we've given them something to think about, some kind of memory maybe to take on their journey with them.
My name is Carolina Miranda. I'm a cultural journalist, and I've covered art, architecture, and other facets of culture for magazines from Time Magazine to Fast Company to Art News. Nicole Hebron is a really interesting artist, and she's somebody I discovered purely by accident by literally going to see art. I was at Jankar Gallery in Chinatown, and there was a piece by her hanging on the wall. It was like a pink and blue piece that cataloged the gender balance of every gallery in Los Angeles. And sort of the pinker the piece got, the more women the gallery had, and the bluer the piece got towards the bottom, the more men the gallery had. You know, you sometimes feel that as a woman, maybe you're not getting ahead as much as the men, but you don't necessarily have any evidence to completely prove it. She says her moment came when she was reading Artforum, and Artforum is the Bible for all things art world. If you're in it, it's a very big deal. And she was reading through it, and she just had this sense that of the single-page ads, that most of them were for men, and so she sat down and counted. And they were indeed mostly for men. It was roughly a 70% male to 30% female breakdown. For her, it was really this awakening because it was consistent month after month, but also it was thinking about all of the support, the commercial support that a male artist enjoyed that most women just didn't have access to. She started with the Artforum project, counting the ads in Artforum, posting the gender totals on her Facebook page, eliciting reactions from people to the point where it became this point of conversation. And then she was invited to participate in a show at West LA College, and she said it was one of those shows that caught her kind of unprepared. She hadn't really made any new work. She didn't really have anything she was working on. And she turned to her Facebook and she sees this post that she'd put about the Artforum page totals, and she thought, you know what, I'm going to do something about gender inequity. And because this is a story that affects so many people, and because she is an artist who is really interested in working collectively, I'm going to invite other people to help me track this. And so she put out an open call, and she asked people to make work that charted the gender balance of different galleries in Los Angeles. And she said within 5 days she had about 50 artists, and within a week she had even more, and it was one of those things that spiraled, like people pitching in saying, I'll do a poster about Butt Blum and Poe, I'll do a poster about Cherry and Martin. Artists from New York started to call and be like, I'll do the New York galleries. And so it became literally one of those sort of butterfly effect things where like that little flap of the wings on Facebook then ended up turning into this really huge project.
Very often, galleries are the first institutions that pick up young artists straight out of school, or they find them working in their studios and they give them their first exhibition.
Galleries really are, a space where you get to see what is being created at the moment. And the museum is really a repository of those objects that are being created. So it holds the history of the period.
A lot of artists start in the gallery world, and it's through connections to their dealers and other curators where they start getting into the museum world, and those relationships get built or those shows get planned. So are women underrepresented in the art world in general? Yes. In the gallery world? Yes. In the museum world? Yes.
Gallery Tally is a project that was initiated by Nicole Hebron, and it basically looks at the representation of men and women in commercial galleries.
First in Los Angeles, and then New York, and now a lot of other cities around the world.
We're actually looking at the percentage of women and men that are represented at specific galleries, and then artists are making posters that represent that.
Focusing on the kind of statistical aspect of the representation of men and women in galleries kind of highlights how dramatic the discrepancy between male and female artists are in terms of visibility and representation and so on.
It's a totally open platform. Anyone is welcome to join and make a poster. You look at a gallery, you get the data, you get the numbers, and you visualize the data. You can make a poster in whatever style you want, however it occurs to you, and you'll see in the show that we have so many different approaches, from text only to abstract, representational, to graphs, to puns, to appropriated images, to collages. So it really includes a diversity of artistic voices too.
There's maybe 300 artists in this show. I think maybe last I heard there was 800 involved making posters. You know, there are a lot of us now. It's gathering momentum.
It's almost, I would say, overwhelming the number of people that are interested in this topic.
We're artists, we love being artists, and we want to see a better art world. We want to see a more equal, more diverse, more rich, more complex art world.
For generation after generation, we have not cared that women's production was entirely lost.
The Western history of art that looms large in our history. Women have traditionally been almost invisible or much less visible than men. And that's a trend and a development that continues until today.
Why is this happening? I mean, Nicole is pointing out to us all that this is happening in a big, giant way. But what is the real reason it's happening?
One of the arguments that I've heard over and over is, well, we don't look at gender.
I'm thinking about just more things than just the male-female divide, which to me is a little provincial, but I understand the importance.
For me, there's a sense that, you know, when I look at artists, I treat them equally. That's for me like a rule. Like, there's equality already existing in my gallery.
The overall statistics are 70% men, so how is that possible that gender isn't playing some part in that? It has to.
You think you're being fair, but then when you see the numbers in your face, it's really like a different story. You know, it's like being told you're rich all the time and you realize you're poor.
Another thing that galleries will say is, well, we just look at art that's good. The implied message is then art by men is 70% better than art by women.
There have been many philosophers who have tried to define what quality is. Some say the quality lies strictly within the work, within the aesthetic components of the work. There are other people that say the quality is something that extends beyond the work and has something to do with the conceptual interaction between the work and the viewer, or between the work and the maker of the work. There are all kinds of different theories, but in the end, you cannot separate the question of quality from the person who defines the quality. Those two are intricately connected.
Throughout history, the people deciding what was good and the people who were showing their work and making their work were men.
So for me, it kind of gets down to the market, that just blatantly art by men sells better. And I'm interested to know why, and I'm interested to know what we can do to change that.
One reason that there are so many galleries that are not showing very many women is because collectors and museums, in a not small part, drive what's going into the market. We have to sell what people want.
You're listening to what your collectors want, so they'll express interest in the work that they see in your gallery or at an art fair or on your website. And you know, it's a reflection. If you only have 10% women, then there's not going to be much of an opportunity for women to get the exposure.
Most collectors in this country are not aware of the enormous power that they have in actually not only shaping their own collection, not only shaping the success of a particular gallery that they buy from, but also in the long run shaping what everybody sees in the museum.
Collectors often look to galleries as a kind of as someone who would determine like a sense of connoisseurship. You know, like what's valid, what's good, what's important, what's not. And so the gallery served this kind of sorting function.
The art market is not a objective thing, an objective truth. It is something that we create, and we have the power to influence it, and we have the power to direct it in any direction we want to.
It has to be more than just the market, though. I mean, what we're doing. I mean, we're doing something other than making money. And I think that's part of what she's getting at. We could just say, you know, screw it, we're just gonna sell expensive handbags instead. It just has to throw in your, you know, random luxury good here. But it's art. It's a much bigger thing. And to me, that's an important part of why those statistics are interesting and why it matters that people have to think about it.
This kind of intense confluence of forces around gender, art, and the economy all seem to be like at stake for the artists that are involved. And in that sense, again, there's no easy answers for any of those things. But to be involved with a big group of people who are all interested in asking those kinds of questions feels really important.
The narrative that we get is a male white narrative, and it's still that way, or that's kind of the common narrative. And so we're missing out on all of those experiences that don't fit into that, or kind of go beyond that in some way.
The art that the people generated is one of the most important and defining elements that tells later generations about who we are and what we were all about and what our time was all about.
I'm Maxwell Williams, and I'm a freelance arts writer in Los Angeles. Conical Sound is a really interesting project by Alan Nakagawa. He had noticed that there was a lot of similarities between the Sagrada Familia and the Watts Towers, which are Simon Rodia's own kind of weird masterpiece in the Watts neighborhood of Los Angeles. He was going to do field recordings in and around both of these buildings. The idea was that hopefully the sounds were going to be very similar and that the sound waves were going to have like similar shapes. He's kind of approaching sound from the sort of the musicality of the universe, and he's recording things and playing them back to you in a way that allows you to take these two places and put them basically into one place. It is a little bit esoteric, but also when you're hearing it, I think that you're able to see and to feel and to sort of enter this sort of experiential space where you're like, oh, okay, I get it. I'm in both Watts Towers and the Sagrada Familia at the same time. It kind of erases the idea of space and it turns you into kind of an all-hearing God in some weird way.
No. It has a small delay. Yeah. As I thought.
So this is what I would like to do. So I'll just say, okay, is everyone ready to record? Great. And then I'll say, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Uy, pues venga.
De arriba a abajo vais.
Vale, sí, vale. Porque arriba es lo más complicado. Y ahora queda un poco de luz aún. Vale, I'll go over there.
Like I am now? Yeah, right before the cavity. Right there.
So here.
No, just right, yeah, right there. That'd be great.
Okay. Let's put it on record and start recording.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1. For decades, I've been thinking about the similarities between Watts Towers by Simon Rodia and Antoni Gaudi's work in Barcelona. You don't even have to talk about it. It's obvious, right? When you look at their work, they're very, very similar. One obvious connection is this use of the conical shape, the spiral, these towers, for instance.
Instead of generating sound into or around or through specific architectural spaces, he's documenting the sound that already exists within them, that the uniqueness of those architectural spaces creates.
We placed 3 recorders at the 3 triangle kind of shaped base at Watts Towers. We went another day and I put contact mics on the actual towers. It's a very lively sound, almost violent. We got to go into the Sagrada when it's closed and record at 3 height levels. You can almost see the sound move through the ceiling and through the columns. Because I have field recordings of various locations, I want to combine them as to make a new space, like a place that doesn't exist. I don't use the field recordings as is, right? I put it into the computer and I'll play with the EQ and I'll try and find which EQ setting seems to capture the tonality of that particular space. I'll use the same recording and put it on another track and then try and capture a different tone. And what I'm left with is this sort of like color swash in 17 minutes of the recording of an interior space. This seemingly large band of sound, but within that large band, as you listen, it's moving. It's like, it becomes like an organism. That's what I'm shooting for in conical sound, is this experience of this broadband that looks monolithic, but actually, as you keep experiencing, it's not monolithic. It's very much alive. What I'm doing live is I'm adding textures and colors, sounds that I feel enhance what's happening with those field recordings. And I approach my sound as if it were these visual elements, you know. Definitely not just about sound, not just about visual, and it's the tactility of it that excites me.
David Lewandowski makes these viral videos. You know, it's like a YouTube channel. You don't know much about this guy. He only has 2 videos that's out. And you're like, who is this person who spent, this obviously took a long time to make, but you don't know anything about him. And these are these weird, wacky like videos where it's this human being and he almost looks real, but he's not. He's in a real environment. But anyway, it was just this wild video. And so we just kind of started digging and doing some research, and we kind of figured out that it was this guy named David Lewandowski. And so we just kind of wrote him and we're like, man, we really love what you do. Your videos get like 15 million hits. You know, like what else do you do with your time? And he had never talked to anyone before, and he was like, you know what? Yeah, let's do it. Let's, you know, I'll tell you what's going on. He had like been in Tron, like doing the digital effects for Tron Legacy. He had done Oblivion. He had done like Outkast music videos. He had directed this Flying Lotus video with Elijah Wood in it. And we were just like, it just blew us away. You know, that there could be these 2 totally different paths, seemingly, this YouTube channel and then like this actual professional career, and they could be kept so separate that no one ever really knew. And to spend so much time, months and months on something and not care if he gets, you know, recognition from a wide audience. It's just having to put that out there like, I need to do this. And that's something cool about David. He has this system that he works in where it's like one side is morally bankrupt work that he does, and one side is like exactly what I want to do. And so he will do things for money on this end of the spectrum, you know, and get it done and do the best job he can. And then he takes that and he makes exactly what he wants to. That's where innovation comes, is on that spectrum, right? Like when you have the ability, you have a little extra income, so you can just be like, I can just try whatever I want, like nothing's stopping me.
Man, I grew up around arcades. It's a big part of my life. I don't know why. I don't know why arcade culture and arcade games is so prevalent, but I'm hanging on to it pretty desperately as a lot of the other things from my childhood fade away and become irrelevant. This is something that's still pretty important to me. Took about a year of film school, and man, if you could talk to anyone I went to film school with, they would just tell you I hated it. I hated it so much. Like, I didn't like the idea of being a PA for years, or being, you know, like trying to get into a guild for many years and log the hours and stuff. It was just too, maybe I was too lazy or too uninterested by it, but I had to do something else. I had kind of built a name for myself as one of the big Cinema 4D freelancers in LA, and I met this guy Jake Sargent, and I had met this guy Bradley Munkowitz, G-Monk, who brought me in to do Tron. That's the most visible work that I'm ever going to do in my career. Even if I were to direct an independent film and it was a smash hit and millions upon millions of people saw it, it wouldn't even come close to the penetration that something like Tron Legacy has. When you're that young and you're doing the most visible work of your career, you kind of start to feel like everything after that is going to be, you know, downhill. Tron was really my swan song to motion graphics and like kind of big last job that I did. A response overwhelmingly from even people in my family who know what I do was like, "Oh, you worked on Tron? Yeah, oh, amazing. So you did the Jeff Bridges, like you made the young Jeff Bridges?" Like, no, it's not. I didn't do that. I did the motion graphics. Oh, so like you made the light bikes and the ships and stuff and all the VFX? And it's like, no, I didn't. I made the like lines, the like little dots and the lines that move around. Like, oh yeah, cool. Like, the only thing you can do that even has a chance of being remembered, that even has like a sliver of a chance of hope of people sharing or being moved by or in any way kind of being affected by, is by doing your own work. So the first one was made as a sketch for part of a Channel 101 show called Everything. It was the longest running Channel 101 show in the history of the program. So that was shot in my alleyway behind my apartment, and I just put him in the environment, and I showed this to people on my phone, and it pretty universally got a reaction. So it was like discovering that this was a thing was pretty exciting, because I just instantly wanted to start working on it right away. You know, I didn't waste any time. Even though something like going to the store late from eating feels like mental illness when you're creating it, and it really can drive you crazy trying to make something like that, you just feel compelled to make something. Music is the most important, like I would say more important in my life than comedy or design or anything. One of my favorite things to do is drive around listening to music with people in my car. I mean, my whole life I've pretty much had friends that were musicians or in bands or DJs or whatever, and so now, as an adult, I'm able to like share and participate with them more by making videos with them or making videos for them. This is the arm for the Flying Lotus video that Elijah wore. I took a vacation from the project and went to Japan, and I couldn't get away from the project. He was just everywhere. So we took these snaps on set and sent the guy to go get them printed. And instead of printing 5, he printed like 500. So I have 500 photos of Elijah Wood. It's one of those things that you hope is never divorced from context and someone just finds, because it's really weird. Some of the best videos I've seen have been when people were just so into the music that they had to do something about it. There wasn't as much of like a financial incentive or like a career incentive, you know? It's just, this is something I have to do. Playing arcade games is just something that, when you have like pretty severe ADHD, despite all of the noise, it somehow like shapes all of your thoughts to kind of focus on this one thing, and that can be kind of peaceful or meditative in a weird way. This is the Dreamcast I've had since September 9th, 1999. You know, it was a creative platform, but it was really, there was very bad economic stability in the model. So like maybe there's a parallel to my life. People are really attracted to passion, I think, and when you're really passionate about something, they want to help you or help people accomplish their goals a lot of times. Could you imagine if every time you tried to have sex with someone, you had to like talk them through the experience? That's why we have art, because we can't say everything that we want to say in words and in a PDF. It's like really frustrating.